Mentorship. I'm Russ. Clearly good mentorship takes longer than 15 minutes. My aim, as always with this podcast, is to pass along things I've learned, along the way, things I'd talk about with you if I were your mentor and we were talking over coffee, things I've shared with others over coffee. So as always, grab a coffee. Let's dig in. Today's episode is from Resilient Faith. My good friend, Jamelle Jones, the pastor there, asked me to join in a show. And so I mercilessly cut apart his episode to make this. I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to another Resilient Faith interview. My name is Jamelle Jones, and I am glad that you all are tuning in to watch this video, or if you listen to the podcast, I appreciate you giving all the views. That being said, I want to go ahead with no introduction, just give a warm welcome to a good friend of mine, Russ. Russ, how you doing, man?
I love you, brother. It's great to see you. Great to be here.
Man, I'm so glad that you are doing this with me and just kind of sharing your faith, your life, and what's going on. And I appreciate you just taking the time to do that. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So, hey, we're just going to dive right into it because I think this is a very important question to get started.
For sure.
I love hearing this because it gives me encouragement, it inspires me, and it may inspire others who are listening right now. How did you come to know Jesus as your Lord and Savior?
So my parents were actually youth pastors before I was born. I didn't know that for a long time because when I remember them, they weren't.
Right.
And I realized actually years and years and years later that they lived by the Sermon on the Mount. Really, that was sort of their guiding principle in life. They never preached it. They never pushed it. They never talked a whole lot about Jesus and made it a big deal. But that's how they lived their lives. And so as I grew up, I went to church. I tell people I knew Jesus the way I knew Joe Biden. I mean, like I knew of him. I had seen pictures and heard stories, but I didn't know the guy. And so I went away to college and went away and sort of wandered and did a bunch of stuff that was in the long run hurtful to me. But then the woman who is now my wife and I got together, and the two of us in parallel, without talking to each other, started coming back toward faith. In a little church up in New York, there was a little tiny spark within that church, within that community, that really started. And one Sunday morning, before the service had started, so the pastor doesn't take any credit or anything, like wasn't the service that did it. I was sitting there in that old church, beautiful old stained glass windows, and I just knew that I knew Jesus and Jesus knew me.
Wow.
And we had a relationship, and it was okay. Like it was a fine thing. And since that time, in little ways and big ways, I have felt that presence in my life on and off now. That's been 30 something years now. But I don't have a big like splashy moment, just a slow, gentle, like, oh, okay, I get it. And it was not too, it was, you asked a question, it was not like, oh, all my doubts have been satisfied. It was not, oh, like I've got a lot of head knowledge and I've studied and I'm nothing. It was just like, I am in the presence of the ruler of the universe and he loves me.
That's good.
And it's okay.
So what would you say to the person that right now that's kind of like trying to figure that out?
I would say God knows you.
Yeah.
God knows you better than you know yourself, for sure.
Right.
This is a thing I've learned over time. I wouldn't have said it at that time, but I understand it now. And so I was cynical at that time. I was living in New York, and I had just quit one job to get another job and got like a $10,000 pay raise. And like, I was doing well. I was okay. Like me. But God knew that I wasn't going to listen to some salesy, like, come and be saved now, right? And none of that, like that. I was just going to go, shut up, right? I was not going to listen to a street corner preacher. I was not going to listen to a bombastic sermon. But but I was going to listen to love. And
Come on, speak on that. Yeah,
that was what I needed at the time.
yeah,
I was doing okay.
yeah,
And like I said, my wife, the woman who is now my wife, I was dating at the time, and we were at church together.
yeah,
And we had a wonderful relationship, but
yeah,
I didn't have a community that loved me,
yeah.
um, outside of
That's
like
good.
my immediate family, right?
Yeah.
And God just knew me and knew my heart and knew that's what I needed at
Mm,
the time. And
mm,
so if somebody today is like, what's going on? I would say just listen to where your needs are, because God
yeah,
knows those. And where those are
yeah.
being met, maybe that's God nudging you a little bit and saying, hey, come on.
Mm,
And so
gosh.
for me, that was just, it was a, and two, it's a real need thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a love thing. It's,
Mm,
could I have used more money? Yeah. But
right.
was money going to really draw me in and really connect deeply with me? Nah. Could
Right.
I have used more attention? Yeah, yeah. But would that
Mm,
have really connected? Was that a lasting thing? But love was a lasting thing. And that's what I say,
mm,
if you're searching for that, don't look for the transactional things. Don't look for the
mm,
temporary things. Like,
yeah.
look for the deep things. God knows your needs. God will be
Yeah.
there. God will be there.
So Russ, I don't know if you heard the expression of the 10,000 hour rule. It's where,
Mhm.
if people haven't heard of it before, it's if you're like musicians use it a lot. If you practice for 10,000 hours, then hopefully you should be really good at your craft. You should be able to, write some good music, be able to perform well, be able to play certain notes, key structures, know theory well. It comes with that. And I feel like we can apply that to being forever learners in life and in faith. And so when you kind of take that and kind of put it into the perspective we're trying to use here, like what inspires you to keep pursuing a better version of you? And can that be unhealthy though in the pursuit of it?
Yeah, it can be. But back to the first part of that question, what keeps me pursuing that? Um, Somewhere along the way,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was sort of some catalyst that made it happen. But
Yeah.
somewhere along the way, I discovered that though I was a cocky 20 something, I didn't actually know everything. I was like,
Right. Yeah.
what do you mean I don't know everything? But I went from, like, in business, I went from being the youngest guy in the room to being the guy
Yeah.
who always had something to say at the table. And I was
Mm,
full of myself, right?
yeah.
But I learned somewhere along that path is like, you don't know everything. And certainly,
Mm,
um, when I really started feeling God pulling on me and drawing me
right.
in, it was really
Right.
obvious that I didn't know everything. Like, I got
Yeah.
John 3:16, and like that's
Mm-hmm.
it. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
3:17,
Right.
no, no, I don't have that yet, right?
Right.
It was just like,
Right.
just this much. And so
Right.
I looked at other things, right? Like, I learned to play guitar in fifth grade, and my fifth grade guitar teacher was like, if you practice half hour every day, you'll be awesome. And I'm like, if I
Mm.
practice a half hour every day, I won't have anything else to do. So I did for a while, and then I realized, oh, I'm not that great of a guitarist, and I put it down, and then I picked it back up and I practiced some more, and I got better, and I put it down, and I picked it back up and I practiced some more, and I got better, right? It
Yeah.
happens with everything, right? That 10,000 hour
Yeah.
rule, maybe it's not 10,000 hours, but it's everything. Like, the more you do
Right.
it, the better you get. And so, in faith, like, we started digging into Bible studies, and we started
Mm.
serving a little bit at the church, and getting
Hmm.
into some small group discussions. And then when my wife and I got married, we had premarital counseling,
Yeah.
but the pastor who married us had already retired. So our premarital counseling sessions would just be like hours long of just talking about stuff, like spiritual
Mm.
stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and she was just wonderful, because we both had a history of going to church and stuff, but not really knowing a whole lot.
Yeah.
And she talked a lot of depth and truth. And I think that also then
Mm.
motivated us to say, okay, we can continue along that path. Um,
Yeah.
but it can definitely get unhealthy
Yeah.
sometimes. Is like, I
Hmm.
can get so sure of something,
Yeah.
some Bible passage, some teaching, some verse, some rule.
Yeah.
I can get so sure of that I then
Mm.
forget what that's about. And I've said it to people. This really became clear to me maybe about a year and a half ago, is that some people worship the Bible and not the
Mm.
God who created it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Speak on that. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
some people worship the church
Mm.
and not the God who is Lord of it, right?
Mm.
You get
Yeah.
fixated on a thing,
Mm.
and that thing is just what it is, right? If I
Yeah.
have a Bible, it's a book, great book, but it's a book, and it's
Yeah.
not changing, and it's not
Yeah.
moving,
Come
and I
on.
can go pick it up when I want to pick it up, right?
Come on. Yeah.
Um, and the church maybe it's a building, maybe it's a shiny, fancy building, right?
Hmm.
But it's still there tomorrow, and
Yeah.
I go there when I want to
Yeah.
go there,
Yeah.
and I can get really cocky about those things too, right? I can
Hmm.
go, oh, I know it all. Oh, I've got this, right? I figured it all out. And what I've done is
Yeah.
I've figured out a set of things that I've stopped at,
Yeah.
right? And that's for me, that's where it gets like toxic, right? Is I
Mm.
figured something out and I stop. And I don't go, God, where are you moving? What are you
Hmm.
doing? Where are you leading me?
Yeah.
What are we
Come
doing
on.
here?
Yeah.
And I go, no, this is how it's got to be. And so I stopped listening and I stopped learning and I stopped moving. But the one thing I have learned for sure over the years of my spiritual journey is that God is moving. God is alive and
Mm.
active. God will
Mm.
not be held down in the pages of a book. He will not be
Amen.
boxed up in a building, right?
Yeah.
There's
Amen.
there's
Amen.
so much more than is there.
Yeah.
And when I just grab onto something and hold on to it and go like this, I figured this all out. I don't need to do anything more. That's the beginning of the end right there.
Do you have any golden nuggets that you can share with all of us that are listening about how to be a forever learner, and how to grow and not be so self-centric, but
Hmm.
more Christ-centered in how you look and see and live with people and do life with people? Because it's beautiful when you have mentors, and it's
Hmm.
another beautiful thing when they could give you some, here's a nugget here. Oh, I remember that. And you can replay it in your mind and use it. So,
Number one, a thing that has stuck with me for a long time since the first time I heard it. Vince Lombardi, right? One of the greatest
mm,
football coaches of all time. So good
mm-hmm,
that the Super Bowl trophy is named after him, right?
yep.
He started every season by holding up a football and saying, "Gentlemen, this is the football." And his, but his whole idea was like, let's go back to the basics. We need to
Yeah,
make sure we're covered in the basics. Like, let's
yeah,
practice those. Let's go do those things. Let's
yeah,
think about it from the beginnings. Like, we're here to play football. Here's the football, right? That kind of stuff.
absolutely.
And that idea has served me so well over time. I was one of, I've heard it a couple of times, but the first time I heard it, it was from a guy who was sort of mentoring me and saying that's an important thing to do is you need to
Yeah.
keep going back to the basics because sometimes we forget,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, we
Sometimes we
do. We
forget
do.
stuff. We move on. We're like, no, I've got that covered, and really, you haven't
Right.
got that covered. Um,
Woo. That's a whole
spiritually,
lesson in itself.
oh yeah, it's a big long list, right? So, but spiritually,
Yes.
especially, right? It's easy
Yeah.
to go like, no, I'm fine in that area, and I'm not fine. Um, but yeah, Jesus summarized the commandments as love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
gentleman, here is the football, right?
Yeah.
That's this is a football kind of thing. And so you need
Yeah.
to check in with yourself. How is my heart? How
Right.
is my mind? Like, how is my soul, my spiritual, and how's my strength, like physically, the influence that I have in the world, all the things that make me a strong person. Like, how are those things? And am I really
Absolutely.
focused all those things on God? Am I really, am I loving myself more than I'm loving the people around me? Like,
Yeah.
that's a very like a back to basics kind of question.
Yeah.
John Wesley, I'm a Methodist pastor, right? John Wesley was the founder of Methodism. He had a list of 22 questions um, that he and his early Methodist and his early groups would all go around and ask themselves and ask each other. And they were all
Mm.
things like just like the basics. Like, how proud am I? Like, am I too proud about myself and my accomplishments? Am
Mm.
I am I praying? And am I really
Mm.
praying? Or am I just like, oh, I'm going to say a prayer now. I got to go do the next thing. Like,
Right.
and so and that was actually my first book that I wrote was about John Wesley's 22 questions. There's just a little Bible study about
Mm.
those things, right? But that idea of make sure you've got the basics and keep going
Yeah.
back to the basics and keep revisiting
Yeah.
and check on them. And maybe you
Yeah.
go, hey, I'm great. I'm feeling really good in this area. And you go on. And
Mm.
maybe you go, oh,
Right.
when I really ask, when I really stop and think for a minute about that, oh, I gotta, gentlemen, this is a football, right? I gotta get back to that thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that really has served me super well uh,
Yeah.
over time. Um, the other one, um, the question for me, maybe it's been now a decade or so, when the question shifted for me, is what lifetime are you learning for? Um,
Ooh.
and
Okay.
and so if I think that I'm learning for my career lifetime, right?
Right.
If I'm 20, I might work till I'm 60 or 70. So I got like, okay, 40, 50 years, I'm learning and I'm becoming a great whatever, crafts person
Right.
or leader or artist or whatever you are.
Yeah.
If I'm saying, no, I'm learning for my whole lifetime, and I expect I'm going to live 80, 90, maybe 100 years. Maybe somebody who's 20 years old today is going to live to be 120, maybe. Or I got 100 years I got
Mm.
to learn. Okay. But about a decade ago, the last line of the hymn Amazing Grace just sort of stuck in my head. And it says, when we've been
Mm.
there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we'd first begun. And that idea of, as a believer in Jesus, you
Yeah.
have an eternal life that starts the moment you believe. And so you
Mm.
can live with the power of Jesus in your life. You can live guided by the Holy Spirit, but you're
Mm.
not just like not working for the time that you're working at this company or for the life of your career or even till you breathe your last breath. Like you
Yeah.
have a like 10,000 year view that I've thought about now for it's probably been a decade. Um,
Yeah.
and I fully expect to continue learning things. So when we've been there 10,000 years, I will
Mm.
still be learning. There will still be something
Yeah.
new and interesting and awesome because
Yeah.
there's nothing there's no possibility that I can learn it all, right? There's no possibility that
Yeah.
I can make myself the best version of myself. Zero chance. It
Mm.
is simply not going to happen. But I know the one
Yeah.
who can, and I know he's working on me. And I
Yeah.
know if I stick close to him, another agriculture metaphor from the gospel according to John, right? Is he's like a vine, and I'm just a branch
Yeah.
sticking into that vine. And if I'm attached, then oh wow, my leaves are going to grow, and I'm going to produce fruit. It's going to
Hmm.
be great, right? But if not, well, that's not so good, right? So I need to stay connected to that. I need to stay. Uh,
Yeah.
plugged into that. And that mindset, like I said, it changed the way I look at things. It
Hmm.
means when I have a problem, it's not so earth-shattering. Do I have
Right.
griefs and worries and regrets? Yes, 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 yes. But do I know that someday, somehow, some way, we'll figure out why that happened or how that happened or exactly what it was? Yeah, I know. Will it
Mm.
be tomorrow? It probably not.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
might
Right.
it be 100, 1,000, or 10,000 years from now? Yeah. And I realize again, to people who don't know, that sounds ridiculous. Um,
Yeah.
but also, it would have sounded ridiculous to me when I was
Right.
22, before I had
Yeah.
actually tasted and seen and actually, oh, this is there's something here. Let me see. Right. And
Yeah.
so continuing to live and learn in that way, man, there's nothing like it.
I
Oh yeah.
think that that's spot on, Russ. That's absolutely spot on. So as we round the corner with this last question, man, I just I thank you so much for coming on to the Resilient Faith interview. I really appreciate that. And I just want to ask you one more thing just to close it out. Like, if you could give anybody anything right now as they're listening and watching this video about growth in faith, growth in life, continuing to learn, moving through adversity, God wooing you and loving on you, everything we kind of talked about, what could you leave us with?
You're not done.
Mm.
You're not done
Oh,
yet.
that's good.
You're not done yet. And that's okay.
Mm.
It's okay that you're not done yet.
Yeah. That's good. That's so good.
Hey, thanks for tuning in and giving your precious attention to me. You can share your experiences or suggestions for future episodes. Just go to 15mentor.com, 15mentor.com. In your podcast player, YouTube, wherever you found this, subscribe, like, follow, bell, thumb, whatever you do to get more episodes. Tell a friend, invite a friend to coffee and tell them. Feel free to find me on the socials. Just spell out my whole name. There you go. I'll see you next time.